practices, and now this budget. And while it has been perfumed over to try and make it more palatable, the underlying motivation leaves a bad taste in my throat and my heart. Whether we're looking at changes in legislation, regulations, policies, procedures, or decision-making, the scent of mean-spiritedness is getting stronger. The trend I see is to delay, download, underfund, add procedures, review, limit access, freeze, and confuse. So citizens in this province are denied their social safety net. The results are leading to frustration, fear, despair, missed opportunities, and quite frankly, second-class citizens. It's taken me 2 years to reach this level of frustration. Now, many of my colleagues have been in the House and have been trying to advocate on behalf of people with the department for much longer, and I know that they share my views and they feel just as strongly. But I had to learn it myself, and now I feel compelled to share what I did learn. For example, this year's department's business plan admits that the department does not have a social policy framework. To quote their own words, quote, "A social policy framework is key to enabling government to respond to the changing needs of Nova Scotians in a coherent and effective manner," end of quote. They will be taking a first step towards developing a social policy framework this year, which to my way of thinking, and certainly what I've seen over the past 2 years, is an admission that they have not been responding in a coherent and effective manner, let alone in a way that meets the standards of my party. And just to remind my listeners in the chamber, my party's standards include treating citizens with respect and dignity and working to eliminate poverty. So how seriously is the minister and his department taking this pledge to develop a social policy framework? Well, you will be pleased to know that it will go so far as beginning some preliminary research in 2005-2006. So the lack of any social policy framework and principles may account for the piecemeal, inconsistent, and unfair approach that has been evolving under the Department of Community Services. However, while developing a social policy framework sometime in the future is a worthy goal, it does not excuse an imbalance that is becoming more obvious throughout the department, and that is the focus on saving money over serving our most vulnerable. And I want to give a few examples. Themes that we will be following up in our party's questioning of the minister during estimates. There's a freeze on placements for people with disabilities and long-term mental illness under the Community Supports for Adults program. You may remember a story I raised during this last year in the legislature about a woman who had to remain in the Truro prison for women far beyond her release date because of the department freeze. In Metro alone, there are 100 people who have met all the eligibility criteria for placement in the Community Supports for Adults program, but are on a wait list. I was stunned when I heard that number, and I questioned the reason why. I was told that this program depended on available resources, that people, even though eligible and in great need in this province, were not entitled to this program. And I'm talking here about the most vulnerable people who, along with their families, need help desperately. Another example of outrageous decision-making is the increasing number of cases in which young people in the care of the minister are being transferred to other settings against the advice of medical and other professionals to cheaper situations. And people who try to intervene on their behalf are intimidated by department officials, and the transfer goes ahead just to save money, not in the best interests of children. Another example, for today's purposes only, is the fact that Nova Scotia saw the highest increase in food bank use in the Atlantic provinces, 46% since 1997. Approximately 40,000 Nova Scotians are forced to use food banks, and 40% of the people who benefit from this service are under the age of 18. 40% of the people who receive food from the food bank are under the age of 18. Yet last October, this government gave a $4 increase for food to people most in need, and this year, tax breaks to large, profitable corporations. I received a call a few weeks ago from an individual trying to track whether or not this government actually gave grants to food banks. He couldn't believe. I did check it out, and it is true. There are a number of food banks in this province who receive direct grants from the government. And he couldn't believe that a government would actually create a problem where people didn't have enough food, their income was low, and they were forced to go to food banks. And rather than dealing with the problem directly, the government would turn around and fund food banks and actually verify that this was a problem, one that they were not dealing with. Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, this is disgraceful, and the NDP and the people of Nova Scotia expect the government to meet its responsibilities to all citizens of this province, not just those who vote for them or who donate to them. So I will have some very tough questions for the Minister of Community Services. This situation has gone on long enough, and I have to say that it's a shared responsibility among all the ministers, because often the weaknesses in social programs in other departments are leading people to fall under the mandate of the Department of Community Services. And so when you notice that the clients being served by community services are people who suffer from multiple challenges, including low education levels, low literacy rates, people who have not been able to receive adequate mental health services, and others, you realize that the social safety net in Nova Scotia is weakening, and a lot of these people are being shifted to community services. Community services is not following through with the adequate supports that are necessary, and so these people are being pushed out into the street, back into their communities and their families without the adequate resources that we expect from a responsible government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West. Okay, we'll just have a slight delay there till we find our speaker. I know one of our speakers is currently in the chair in the red room. He was going to go last, so I will. Do you want to get Mark? Thank you. I'd like to recognize the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak today on the Financial Measures Act. The bill is especially important to the government because it's one that, with a few facts, it could be called and it could result in the defeat of the government if it doesn't receive a majority vote. Mr. Speaker, the bill is rather especially important to consider. The most interesting part of the bill is the debt management fund and the commitment to ensure that $830 million can't be used to balance the budget. Well, Mr. Speaker, that $830 million coming from the offshore, there's already a stipulation in place from the federal government that it can't go anywhere else but there. And I believe we're being led to believe that it could be put here, there, or everywhere, but at the same time, it must go onto the debt. The budget must be balanced without the offshore fund, Mr. Speaker. And while the intention is noble, that's not what the government seems to be doing. The $830 million is a very key part of the budget, and what happens if it doesn't arrive or arrive on time? Mr. Speaker, it would cause this government to have to borrow $1.2 billion to keep the budget that was presented in this House. Mr. Speaker, this budget is claiming to be a surplus of $63 million. If this bill becomes law, then the government must change that part of the budget. It's another, I wouldn't say deception, that's probably too strong, but maybe smoke and mirrors, maybe more appropriate, Mr. Speaker. But it shows poor financial policies and planning on behalf of the government. And there's no plan for reduction, Mr. Speaker. You've heard me before in this House, and I will later in my talk refer to the escalating costs through the Department of Transportation. According to the proposed budget, it will be 2009 before the debt goes back to the levels that they are at today. So what I would like to ask is, where is the balanced budget? People that have a balanced budget have a financial plan, and all accounts are balanced. But this year, Mr. Speaker, the debt is growing, and to be quite frank, the debt is going to grow by $90 million this year. I will give some finer specifics later on in my talk. But how can the government say that they're putting $830 million on the debt, and the debt is still growing by $90 million a year? Mr. Speaker, don't take this out of context, but I always seem to refer lately to my sociology professor back in Xavier Junior College, that Father Brooks Campbell, when he told us that statistics don't lie, only the people that make them. So I suppose you can put whatever you want into a computer and get the proper information back. The province seems to be only interested in things that cost money, not things that make money, as you heard me say yesterday when I spoke in favor of the royalty on the Water Act. And Mr. Speaker, we should be receiving royalties on all our natural resources. So, Mr. Speaker, here's what we have: a supposedly $63 million surplus. The debt is going up by $90 million, and supposedly the offshore money is going to the debt. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's no choice. As I said, the offshore money, in order to receive it from the feds, must go to the debt. I would like the province and this government to explain that to the people of Nova Scotia, not to lead them to believe that they're doing a very wonderful thing by putting this money to the debt. Mr. Speaker, after all is said and done, the government is still borrowing $340 million to supposedly balance the budget. Now, if you have to borrow to balance, that to me is mismanagement. It's not fiscal restraint. That's not living within our means. It's not fiscal management. Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering, when will this kind of fiscal mismanagement and underachievement stop? The Honourable Premier promised in 1999, then again in 2001, that the debt would stop growing. So, Mr. Speaker, let's look at some facts, and we'll see whether the Premier misled the people or not. Every resident in the province of Nova Scotia today owe over $12,000 each. That's what it would take to remediate the debt. Over $12 billion in debt for the province. So where's the balance? Oh, I have a balanced bank account, yet I owe $12 billion. Doesn't seem right to me, Mr. Speaker. On April the 17th in 2001, the Premier told this legislature here, he said, Mr. Speaker, what I will confirm is that a year from now, this government will introduce a balanced budget, and from that day onward, the debt of this province will no longer grow. Mr. Speaker, did the Premier break his promise? I think so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to quote from the Chronicle Herald. The Premier wrote in the Chronicle Herald, to be sure that there are some people who suggest that the government should continue borrowing on its debt and spending beyond its means. I don't believe there is merit in this argument. Such an approach might feel good today. However, we need to ask ourselves, who pays for it tomorrow? Mr. Speaker, $2.5 million in interest, as you heard the honourable member from Richmond state today, in interest. $2.5 million in interest per day is what it's costing Nova Scotia residents and this government. Another day older and deeper in debt, Mr. Speaker. There's no industry left down in my riding and down in Cape Breton. There's no coal mines left there. There's no steel plant left there. And as I quoted from the old song, you can't load 16 ton anymore because there's no business down there to do that. But we can surely be one day older and deeper in debt, Mr. Speaker. And the question arises, who pays for tomorrow? I'd like to say tomorrow has arrived, Mr. Speaker, because we're all paying for it now. And it's funny that back in 1999, the Premier wouldn't support the budget because it added to the debt. And since the Premier came to office, the debt has grown by $2.5 billion. Underachievement, mismanagement, poor operations, I don't know, Mr. Speaker, or a combination of all. $2.5 billion is the entire health budget for this province for this year. $1 billion more than in 1999. So, Mr. Speaker, let's look at what the Premier told the Chronicle Herald on New Year's Eve in 2001. The Conservative caucus voted against a budget of $600 million deficit. I told Nova Scotians that in good conscience I could not support more debt. That's the Premier's words. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see that there's a halo around this man anywhere or around any of this government. It looks like the man can do no wrong or nobody can do any wrong, but yet the debt is going sky high. The Premier does know in good conscience that he is adding to the debt. The Premier and the government doesn't have any credibility on the debt, Mr. Speaker, because there's promises broken, and it looks that he's clearly misled Nova Scotians. This bill does have some good clauses, including the $150 credit tax for participation in recreation. But I wonder who will that serve, Mr. Speaker, because for the $150 credit tax is going to amount to $15 a saving per child. So my evaluation of that tells me that to save $15 per child, that's only going to affect people who have their children already enrolled in sporting activities. Nobody is going to invest the hundreds of dollars required to enter their child in sporting activities to save $15. The film tax credit, something that was brought forth when we had a sound studio down in Cape Breton. The tax credit was cut, the sound studio gone, like the coal mines and the steel plant. Now the tax credit comes back, But there's no incentives outside of Halifax. They're not adequate, Mr. Speaker, to want people to create more film industry and receive a good tax credit. I look at roads. $3.4 billion to grow to 4.3 in 2011. Most people want to pay down their debt, Mr. Speaker, and as I said in the question previous that to the minister, they're sitting back and watching this debt grow. Am I disappointed? Yes, that's mismanagement. Is there accomplishments there? No, that's underachievement. Mr. Speaker, we have a government that promised the world in 1999 and has failed to deliver. What do we have? Missed opportunity. Most people, Mr. Speaker, make a plan. Any local community group or organization, they always talk about you should have a 5-year plan to see where you're going to go and a 10-year plan to where you intend to be in 10 years' time. Well, there's no plan here, Mr. Speaker, that I can see. 6 years of missed opportunity. 6 years of neglecting our education system. There's $500 million in deferred school repairs. $500 million in repairs to the schools that have been deferred. Our students were number 10, the lowest funded in the country, and we went from number 10 to number 10 because of this budget, Mr. Speaker. 6 years of increased fees and taxes. There was 500 user fees slipped through in one day in the fall when the House wasn't sitting. Talk to the people about that one and see if they agree with that. And as I said, 6 years of neglected roads. Where's the fiscal management and the planning? How can you look forward to your debt increasing rather than having a management plan looking forward to the debt on the roads decreasing? 6 years of watching the offshore oil industry. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Energy stated in the House that they're going to increase the budget for the Department of Energy by another $1 million. They're going to hire 4 more people to work in the Department of Energy. And I'm wondering if these are just going to be 4 more patronage jobs, Mr. Speaker, because I'll tell you why. Increasing the budget after the oil companies have left, boasting that $55 million in penalties have been put into the economy of this budget. I can quote from the Cape Breton Post, May the 5th, today, an article by Wes Stewart, who says that an offshore technologies conference in Houston, Texas, was told improved regulatory processes will streamline the exploration of natural gas and oil off Nova Scotia. Then I quote our Honourable Minister Clark, saying, Minister of Energy, saying, operators want a predictable and competitive business environment, one in which they can reasonably anticipate costs and approval times. That's what the Minister Clark said on Wednesday. That means upfront costs and quicker cycle times for explorers. Now, the oil companies have become explorers, and the upfront costs and quicker cycle times, Mr. Speaker, lovely, flowery words. 55 million paid in penalties by oil companies leaving. They have no intention of coming back, Mr. Speaker. And one of the gentlemen from Encana was quoted on CBC just recently saying that they left because there was too many minute testing and too much costly rules and regulations that they had to go through in order to succeed. It was too costly. It was cheaper for them to pay their $55 million in penalties and pull up stakes and leave. Mr. Speaker, I talked about the loss of mining, steel plant, the sound studio down in Cape Breton, and I'm wondering, when I come to the tourism sector, and I remember the slogan of Nova Scotia's masterpiece, and I believe what's happened under this government is they have allowed Nova Scotia's masterpiece to become a piece of pizza, Mr. Speaker. 6 years ago...
Order. Time has expired for the honourable member. Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. Tony Blair, at a Labour Party conference in October 1996, he said at that conference, asked me what my platform is, and I'll respond in 3 words: education, education, education. I feel like I'm imitating Tony Blair a little bit this afternoon, because last night I spoke about education and the importance of education, and in particular about the funding that this government has provided for the community college system. And I mentioned last night how important this is for 2 reasons. The first is that we're entering an economy where people, to gain employment, will have to have a post-secondary education. We know that to be true, Mr. Speaker. The jobs for people who have grade 12 or less are disappearing, while the jobs for people who have a post-secondary education are increasing. And that causes a problem, I mentioned, in this province, because the majority of our citizens have less than a grade 12 education. And of those who go to post-secondary education, the vast majority go to university rather than community college, which is out of whack, out of balance with the other provinces across Canada. Part of the reason for this was really that our community college was underfunded to a certain degree, and it was an institution in need of change and in need of a new vision. And our government was a government that did this, Mr. Speaker, with the cooperation of the many professors and teachers, administrators, and particularly with the Principal Ray Ivany. This government helped transform the Nova Scotia Community College system into being one of the leaders in community college education in Canada. And one of the cornerstones of this government has been its funding for the community college system. Over $130 million, Mr. Speaker. Last year, 2 years ago, was announced, and then last year came into effect, and operating money to help complement that capital spending. I'm particularly pleased, Mr. Speaker, that King's Tech campus in Kentville was one of the schools that received additional funding. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, outside of Halifax, King's Tech campus was the largest, received the largest amount of money for funding in order to expand its program in Kentville. $13.4 million in capital spending and increased money in operating expenses to help pay for new courses that they'll be offering and for a renovated building there. I mentioned yesterday that my colleague from Kings South, David Morris, and myself had the opportunity to tour this facility on at least 2 occasions, and on the second occasion, we went through the woodworking, the small engine, the large engine, and the plumbing shops, the new buildings they had, which made their work as teachers and as students so much more productive. And at the very end of it, we asked the question of one of the instructors about the job prospects for these students. And the instructor replied that 10 years ago, the students would have difficulty finding jobs, but that now they had their pick of jobs and that they couldn't graduate enough students to meet the job opportunities that were out there. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the great accomplishments of this government and something to be lauded. The Minister of Education and the Premier have made this a priority. And it is something that's benefited the province as a whole, and certainly it's something that's benefited the riding of Kings North. There are other parts of the budget that I want to speak to besides the impact upon the community college and the operating money that's there for the expansion. I should mention, Mr. Speaker, while I'm on it talking about the LPN seats that will be at King's Tech Community College, that there's a nice fit, a nice synergy between the new LPN seats that will be at the community college in Kentville, along with the new nursing seats that will be funded at Acadia University right next door, and a wonderful synergy. The riding of Kings North along with Kings West and Kings South is becoming quite an educational centre, with Acadia University, one of the leading universities in Canada and the world, with King's Tech College, which now with its infusion of capital, one of the leading community college facilities in Canada, with the work that goes on at the base there in Aldershot and the training of reserves, a wonderful academic influence within the riding. The other things I want to laud about the budget, Mr. Speaker, are the help for the Orchard Renewal Program in agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most important activities within Kings North. It's a $430 million industry, And it's an industry, Mr. Speaker, that's committed to Nova Scotia, committed to the area. It's not going to pack up and move away. The people invest their lives, they invest their blood, sweat, toil, and tears in making this industry grow. And the heart of it is in Kings County and to a large part in Kings North. And so I'm pleased for the support that this budget has shown for the Orchard Renewal Program. This is a program that is far-sighted, where the growers are looking towards the future and anticipating where they need to be in the future, and the government, in recognition of this far-sighted, futuristic vision of our orchard growers, has decided to fund this as a new initiative, $250,000. And I know the fruit growers in Nova Scotia, who I worked with to help lobby the Minister of Agriculture, who in turn lobbied cabinet colleagues to have this orchard renewal program go through. I know that they're very, very pleased with it. In terms of health, Mr. Speaker, there have been some programs that I've been working on for many years, and they're finally coming to fruition. The new MRI in Kentville is something that has been well received by the community at the Valley Regional Hospital. The expanded emergency room at the Valley Regional Hospital. The 21 new acute care beds at the Valley Regional Hospital, again desperately needed in a hospital that has one of the highest efficiency rates and that operates at almost 100% and sometimes over with people in the hospital. And so these 21 beds are a welcome addition to the Valley Regional Hospital. And then, of course, the long-term care beds in Berwick. 32 new care beds, long-term care beds in Berwick at Grandview Manor, and I was there for the dedication of the facilities and of these new beds, and it was, again, something, Mr. Speaker, that was very well received by the residents there and by people throughout the area. And so in the area of health, there have been significant investments of funding to the area of Kings County and Kings North that I've been working on for years along with my colleagues, and very, very pleased to see the budget bring them into reality. And I know that the residents of the riding are very, very pleased as well. In fact, I heard that David Logie, the head of the District Health Authority, was very effusive in his praise at the volunteer banquet for health officials in the government. And for those of you who know Mr. Logie, he's a very straightforward speaker, and when he has criticisms, you hear them, and when he has praise, you hear it. And he's very full of praise for what this government has done, and in particular mentioned what I was able to do, and I was very thankful for that. In terms of roads, Mr. Speaker, the riding of Kings North is getting, I've been promised, the riding has been promised that there'll be 3 paving projects and perhaps some others to follow, depending on how the money flows in regard to the federal budget in Ottawa. And this, Mr. Speaker, is welcome news. I learned a very quick lesson in how the Liberals do politics in this riding, because when I came into office, I was able to get the list of how much money had gone into roads in Kings North since '93. And, Mr. Speaker, in '93, when the government changed and the Liberals took power, Kings North received no funding for capital roads, none whatsoever. It wasn't really until late in 1999 that we got $200,000, thanks to the courtesy of Don Down, who took some pity on us. But the riding was frozen out because it was on the wrong side of the government at that time. And it's taken some time, Mr. Speaker, to get funding back into capital projects into Kings North. We had 2 years ago, the main street in Canning was paved. After 20 years, they told me that it had never been touched. We had some pavement going up on Highway 358, going up the mountain there, and we'll have some work, some significant work coming as well, Mr. Speaker, this year. And secondary roads, for those of us who are rural MLAs, are our bread and butter in many ways. And like the old real estate slogan that my colleague, the Minister of Municipal Service Nova Scotia, would know, sort of play on location, location, location. For a rural MLA, it's roads, roads, roads. And so I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, that our budget for highway spending has increased dramatically since we've come into office. Every year it's gotten higher and higher and higher. There's still much to be done, but we have done much. We've progressed, Mr. Speaker. In this regard, I want to speak about the 101 and the twinning of the 101. And I'm very appreciative that the highway's twinned now as far as it's twinned. I will continue to push, Mr. Speaker, and I I've made that commitment to the Chamber of Commerce. I've made that commitment to my residents. I'll continue to push for this twinning to be completed all the way to Colebrook and passing lanes beyond. There's been a bit of a delay, Mr. Speaker, and I've written letters to our Minister of Transportation. I've written letters to the federal minister. I've written letters to our federal member of parliament saying, let's get on with this. People's lives are put at jeopardy when the 101 isn't twinned. And we need that twinning. And the Chamber has been behind it, primarily because of the safety, Mr. Speaker. It's not that there are more accidents on the 101 than other highways. It's just there are more fatalities. A very, very sad fact. And so the road needs to be twinned for safety. It also needs to be twinned for economic reasons as well, Mr. Speaker, because it's a vital economic linkage with the railroad gone. There's so much more truck traffic on the road, and so we need that twinning, and I would urge both provincial and federal governments to get on with the job and to continue with that very important task. In the area of health promotion, I want to laud in this budget the work of the Minister Rodney MacDonald in health promotion and the work of that department, Mr. Speaker. One of the key endeavors that I've seen under health promotion that's taken place in my riding has been the Healthy Schools project, helping school children to eat more healthy offerings and helping schools to offer more healthy food. Port Williams Elementary School, which, Mr. Speaker, was lauded recently as one of the leading elementary schools in Canada, received national acclaim, was one of the ones that was chosen as a pilot project for the Healthy Eating Project. And it's been well appreciated. I was there in Somerset School, which is in the riding of the member for Kings West, for the launch of the Healthy Eating program. And it's been a very, very important program that has been well received by these schools and hopefully will spread to schools across the riding and across the province as we attempt to change the eating habits of young people, as we attempt to encourage them to become more involved in exercise and different athletic activities, and therefore start on the road that would see them grow up as healthy adults, something that will be of great benefit to our society in future years. I was pleased to see the increase in mental health funding. Mr. Speaker, I have community groups such as the Friends of Schizophrenia, the King's Mental Health Association, who have been very active in lobbying me and lobbying the government for more help in that regard, to help people who suffer from mental illness, to help them both in treatment and also to help educate people so that we can overcome the stigma that mental health illnesses have in our society still today. In the budget as well, Mr. Speaker, the help for diabetics. And I want to mention this in particular because I want to tie this in with my predecessor, the Honourable George Archibald, who held this seat and was in this legislature, I believe, for about 15 years, Mr. Speaker. And since that time, George has gone on and he's given his time and efforts in a volunteer capacity to many different community organizations. L'Arche, Kings is one of them, but one that's been near and dear to his heart in large part because of his daughter who suffers from diabetes is the Diabetic Association. And Mr. George Archibald was in the gallery when the budget was read because he wanted to say thank you to our government for what they had done. And I, in turn, want to say thank you to him for the work that he's done in helping raise this issue. And he was there with quite a big smile, I have to admit. In terms of small businesses, I mentioned before some of the things that have helped small businesses in my writing that I've been appreciative of in the past, the small business loan program, the multi-year funding for RDAs, but in this particular budget, the removal of the business occupancy tax, which small businesses in my area kept telling me was an irritant, and also the raising of the tax threshold. I should also include, Mr. Speaker, because it doesn't get mentioned as much as it should, but small businesses appreciate so much the balanced budgets that we've had over the past 4 years.
Order. Time has expired for debate going into supply.
Business Leader.
Madam Chair, please call the estimates of the Minister of Health.
So you just say the estimates for the Department of...
The estimates for the Department of Health.
Yeah, you should announce that the Liberals have 26 minutes.
The Liberals have 26 minutes to finish up. And we're waiting for a few people. I don't. The honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I expect to attend to the remaining 26 minutes for our caucus. My opening line of questioning relates to tracking gambling suicides, and I have before me a report from the Chronicle Herald dated 1 year ago today on May 5th, 2004. Minister, to you through the chair, I'd just like to quote from that report as it was presented that day. It starts, "The Ham government plans to investigate the link between gambling and suicides in the province. The Nova Scotia Chief Medical Examiner's Office will collect statistics as part of the study into whether gambling-related deaths are on the rise, as some have claimed. Health Minister Angus McIsaac said he expects a comprehensive report on gambling and its social and economic consequences will be ready in about a year. The people of this province need to have a better handle on the entire field of gambling and gaming," Mr. McIsaac said Tuesday at Province House. "We need to be aware that there are problems that result from this activity and that those problems need to be adequately addressed." My question for the minister is whether or not he still stands by those words.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Certainly, the statements attributed to me were there was a lot of people talking to me, but the gist of them were accurate to the best of my knowledge, and that was certainly what we had hoped to do. I understand there was a great deal of difficulty in being able to really pinpoint the cause of those unfortunate incidents to a particular circumstance. And while in some situations there may be a feeling that the connection was obvious, there are other circumstances where other factors could have been at play and could have been involved in it. I further understand from my colleague that the Chief Medical Officer of Health did write to the Minister of Justice, Chief Medical Examiner, who comes under the Minister of Justice, did write to him with respect to this. At the time when I was recall that particular scrum, and I was answering the questions, the most appropriate response for me to have given on that particular day would be to speak to the Honourable Minister of Health Promotion with respect to the issue, because for some reason the for some reason, the press at that day thought that it was appropriate for me to answer those questions. I realized afterwards that it probably should have been him. That doesn't in any way cause me to back away from what our stated intent was at that time. But I do understand the chief medical examiner as having considerable difficulty with respect to being able to clearly identify these issues, and so the task is proving to be much more difficult than had been anticipated when I made those statements.
The honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Minister of Health, it's noteworthy that the Canada Safety Council recently came out with a report that estimated that there was a suicide a day due to gambling-related problems. It's noteworthy that the Ontario coroner has recently called for the adoption of a report or study on this particular problem. And I want to specifically go to a report in the Chronicle Herald again, this time on March 8th, 2005. My quote will be extensive just so that you have the full context, Mr. Minister. In this report, it says, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner stopped tracking suicides linked to gambling last June, saying it was difficult to gauge how accurate the information was. That's consistent with what you've said. In some cases, Dr. Bose said the family didn't know whether the deceased had a gambling problem or relatives were too upset to talk to investigators. When the province did track the number of suicides between January 2001 and September 2002, it determined 10 to 159 suicides recorded, 6.3% were related to problem gambling. Dr. Bose, in a written reply to Ms. Mullally, this would be Marie Mullally at the Gaming Corporation, said it would be helpful to have reliable information on the many factors contributing to suicides, one of the few things that Ms. Mullally and I seem to agree on these days. He said information would need to, this is Dr. Bose, would need to be gathered as part of a social history developed by people with the appropriate expertise, but he said his office doesn't have the staff or the money to do it. If the province or the Gaming Corporation is really interested in this approach, then we would cooperate in a properly constructed and properly funded prospective study into such an important subject, he said. I would be more than willing to participate in the development and implementation of such a project. Now, in light of this, and frankly, that is consistent with discussions that I've managed to have with the Chief Medical Examiner as well. There are challenges, he says, associated with tracking this, but properly resourced, a study could be done. Given that, my question to you, the Minister, is whether or not you are prepared to provide the proper resources to track suicides from gambling in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My response is not intended to be uncooperative to the member, but it's really a question as to whether these are questions that should be directed to the Minister of Health, or given the quotes that he's using, which is from the Chief Medical Examiner, who is responsible to the Minister of Justice in this province, and with respect to the issue of gaming, which is under the Office of Health Promotion, and the resources that would be related to the request or the question of the honourable member, those resources, in fact, would come under the Office of Health Promotion. And I'm not, I'd be glad to try and answer the questions, but I would really be answering on behalf of the Minister of Health Promotion, because it is his jurisdiction, as well as the jurisdiction of the Minister of Justice with respect to the medical examiner.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel.
Madam Chair, I appreciate what the Minister said in his initial response. He said that I perhaps spoke out of turn and didn't allow the Minister responsible for the Office of Health Promotion to comment in this regard. Nonetheless, he is the Minister of Health. This is obviously a health issue. When people are committing suicide, there's not health to promote. It's a health issue. It's not suicides. I would suggest, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, the question and the issue of suicides in this province isn't an issue for health promotion. It is a question of health. And it's why back a year ago to this day, there was a report in the newspaper that suggested that you said that you would track suicides. And then we have a report from the coroner who says, I'll track suicides if it's properly resourced. So my question to you is, given your commitment, and you expressed it here in writing that you would like to track this, given the level of resources that you have, a couple of $2 billion plus, would you be willing, if the coroner were interested in doing this, would you be willing to simply fund the cost of this through the Department of Health? Because a concern that I have is that when the minister responsible for the Office of Health Promotion is faced with this question, he may say something, and I appreciate that he's here today, he may say, this isn't a priority. The words came out of the mouth of the Minister of Health, and it's for the Minister of Health with his $2.4 or $5 billion budget to be able to say, yes, the nickels and dimes in my big budget associated with doing something like this is doable. We're committed to the words that I had before. So the narrow part of my question, Madam Chair, to the Minister is whether or not, if the coroner were to shape up a costing and a mechanism for doing the study, he would be prepared to fund it.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The issue that's raised by the honourable member, and in no way do I back away from public statements that I've made with respect to what it is that we want to achieve relative to understanding the connection between suicides and the causes of suicides. The situation referenced by the honourable member refers to a request by the chief medical examiner, and to date, to the best of my knowledge, and the deputy is with me and she agrees, we have not received a proposal from the medical examiner. Obviously, having made the commitment which I made in the past, if we receive a proposal from him, it is one which we would give very serious consideration. We would obviously look to see whether it is something that is appropriate for the Office of Health Promotion to fund, or whether it is appropriate for my department to fund. Obviously, the bulk of mental health relates to my department, and I'm quite pleased that we're able to put additional funds in that. And if we were to receive a request from the chief medical examiner, then obviously we would have to give it very serious consideration. And I think, as the honourable member suggests, the number of dollars involved on the surface, at least, should not be great numbers. And assuming that they're not great numbers, what I can commit to the honourable member is that if such a request comes forward, it is one that we will give every consideration to in the spirit of at any rate, we've not received the request. Whether he has made a request through his own department, which is the Department of Justice, I don't know. If such a request is forthcoming, I'm going to be very supportive of the medical examiner receiving the funds that are required to do the work that he wants to do. I'm not committing as to which department, whether it's Justice, Health, or Health Promotion, that those funds will come from. You might think I have unlimited numbers because the numbers are big. I can assure you I don't, and I'm going to make sure that the funding comes from the appropriate department. Will I support such a request? The answer is obviously yes.
The honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
At the risk of sounding overly fussy about the language that we use with respect to this, and I appreciate the minister's commitment in saying that he would look at this seriously if it's reasonable and if it's for an amount that in particular is reasonable in the circumstances. I'm linking up his commitment in language last year where he made the commitment that there would be a comprehensive report, and I would call that to his attention, a comprehensive report on gambling and its social and economic consequences ready in about a year. And secondly, that we have from the coroner the remarks, if the province or the gaming corporation is really interested in this approach, then we would cooperate in a properly constructed and properly funded prospective study into such an important subject. I would be more than willing to participate in the development and implementation of such a project. So I think, Mr. Minister, I don't expect you to sign a contract here today, this afternoon, obviously. But I think that we can go right up to the door. We can provide it, given that you've made this commitment and that the chief coroner is saying, I'm prepared to do it, and you have an interest in it, and assuming, as you've rightly pointed out, that it's not an unreasonable amount, can we take from your comments that not only will you support this, but that this is something that you are prepared to advance as an initiative that you are proactively going to champion, as given the commitment that you made last year, more than just something that you might support if it came before you, but you would be prepared to actively champion the development of this report that you spoke about a year ago?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the quote that the honourable member references in terms of what it is that I said last year, I was speaking with respect to government's intention, and those were things that I believe government stands by. They've certainly done involved in a major socio-economic study. I have indicated the support that I have with respect to mental health issues in this province, and the difficulty the honourable member references is certainly related to that. So I'm not at all afraid of any commitments I'm going to make with respect to the work that's done. But I have to remind the honourable member that I can only respond to specific requests, and I have not received, nor has the Minister of Justice, to the best of my knowledge, and perhaps he has, and when his estimates come up, you might want to ask him that question. But to the best of my knowledge, I have, or what I can say clearly, is that I have not seen a proposal from the Chief Medical Examiner with respect to this issue. So I would want to respond in specific terms to a specific request. What I can say is that in as much as this is an issue which is very, very serious, the issue of suicides in this province, that as a supporter of increased funding for mental health, then that support goes right across the spectrum. And the problem referenced by the honourable member is certainly one that is very important, and one which that I, as Minister of Health, would want to support. So I can't get out and start talking about what specific request may come forward. I can speak in general terms that I stand behind what it was that I said a year ago. We've spoken about the difficulties the Chief Medical Examiner has had in trying to bring together that information. Obviously, if he comes forward with a proposal that would assist in that work, then that is something that we would want to be as supportive of as we possibly can.
Citadel?
There is a nuance that appears to be different from what the minister is saying today and what he said a year ago. And I'd just like to draw out what I believe to be that nuance, and perhaps the minister could respond and indicate whether or not I get that or whether he's prepared to take the step that he took last year. Last year, when he spoke to the media in the media scrum, he indicated that this is something essentially that the government is looking to initiate, that the actions with respect to this were going to start with the government. This wasn't an idea that was asked of you. You were in a scrum and you spoke about the preparation of a comprehensive study. And now we see that the coroner says that that's possible, it just needs to be properly resourced. So the square question for the Minister of Health is whether or not he's prepared to actually not respond to what might come from the coroner, but to initiate the contact with the coroner, recognizing that he may not have read the March 8, 2005 report, and say to the coroner, I see that this might be possible. I made a commitment last year. Let's see if we can work it out. And I recognize the Minister of Justice and maybe the minister responsible for the Office of Health Promotion may have a play in all of this. But is this minister prepared to actually do something more than just respond to a request, but in fact initiate it, given the commitment that his government made last year, 1 year ago to the day?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have absolutely no difficulty in saying to your committee that, and the Minister of Health Promotion is here, and the Minister of Justice must be in the other committee. But I will, I will certainly take it upon myself to initiate contact through the Minister of Justice with the Chief Medical Examiner and just see where he has been, where he intends to go, and if the honourable member has some comfort with respect to that commitment, I'm quite prepared to make it.
The Honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for indicating that. I had some questions. I'll just pick up on a completely different subject that I had raised with the Minister in the past. It relates to the Cape Breton Wellness Program and the funding for the Cape Breton Wellness Program. The Minister might recall that it might be 3 years ago now that funding to the tune of $150,000 was cut out of a program that provided primary health, addressed primary health care, population health types of issues. My question for the Minister is whether or not that funding has in fact been reinstated, or whether or not he would consider funding it because it is an award-winning program recognized across the Maritimes and in fact nationally for providing assistance to a population that is in many respects more challenged than any other population when it comes to health in Canada.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The primary health initiatives that we fund are pretty much all initiatives that come forward to us, from the District Health Authority, and we're involved in a number of those initiatives in Cape Breton through consultation with the District Health Authority, and we tend to respond to what they bring forward to us with respect to their recommendations. I don't know if we can get any more detail on that.
Madam Chair, this was a very specific discussion with respect to the Cape Breton Wellness Centre. It doesn't fall under the umbrella, although it's obviously associated with the Cape Breton Regional Health Authority. It is a separate, award-winning agency that is doing breakthrough work in many of the areas that the Deputy Minister of Health references from time to time about priority areas. It's a mere $150,000 that was originally funded, and the question is whether or not that, if the minister doesn't know, then a commitment that he will undertake to determine what the status of that funding is would certainly be sufficient in the circumstances.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do recall the honourable member raising this issue in the past, but certainly in the interests of clarity and time, the best thing might be for me to say that we will undertake to give you a report on that issue.
I know that time is short. I've got about 30 seconds on this last question. It relates to an issue that came up in public accounts. The Deputy Minister of Health was here when we were talking about alternative funding, and what was being suggested is that with the new funding in health, we need a fundamental shift towards primary health care and not just the tinkering. And we need a clear indication that there is going to be rapid, dramatic movement toward a population health model. Many of the critics are saying that's simply not happening.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The honourable member, when he uses the words he does to describe what we're doing in primary health care is not being fair to the district health authorities or those professionals that are involved in a number of fronts relative to launching new initiatives in the areas of primary health care. I can think in my own area, there are two major initiatives with respect to literacy, and that is something that has moved from GASHA to a province-wide initiative to promote the awareness of literacy as a factor in primary health care. It also is the issue of primary health care with respect to minorities. That is an initiative that came out of GASHA. That also is something that's going to be looked at on a province-wide basis. If we go to Queens County and the DHA-1, we have announced the funding for a health clinic that fundamentally reforms the delivery model of primary health care in the Liverpool area and the Queens County generally. That is something that is up and it is now under construction. That was in response to a community initiative with respect to that particular program. We have a facility for Tatamagouche that was announced this year. That's a major primary health care initiative. I believe it's $2 million that's earmarked for that. Reference was made earlier in the estimates to the Annapolis project with respect to the delivery of a new clinic relative to how primary health care is delivered. You can go, Madam Chair, right across the province and we can find all sorts of initiatives that have been brought forward. And what is good about most of these initiatives, indeed if not all of them, is that they have come forward from the community health boards and the initiatives that they have taken with respect to responding to needs in their own areas. And we will continue to respond to that. So there is a great deal, if we look at the use of nurse practitioners, and we're expanding the use of nurse practitioners, or proposed to with the funding in this year's budget, and we will continue. But we're not coming forward with a single policy or program that says this is the way to do it. We are responding to the needs of communities as identified by community health boards and the district health authorities.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I want to ask you about several areas that are important to people around the province, and certainly you and I will recognize that children's mental health is an area that has a lot of concern throughout our province. Parents and families with children who have mental health disorders or behavioral problems or activities that appear to be behavioral but may be more than behavioral are in very serious circumstances in terms of having to wait to try to access the kinds of assessment services and then the follow-up and treatment services for these children. Now, I've recently become aware of a program, I guess I will call it, a program that was developed with some research, a fairly substantial amount of research dollars to Dr. Patrick McGrath at the IWK Dalhousie. And Dr. McGrath has expertise in a number of areas. He actually, I think, for a number of years was sort of considered to have expertise around children in pain. And he's a psychologist, and he's developed this program that has been piloted in a couple of the DHAs called Family Help. And it is a program where there are a number of coaches, 4 or 5 people who are trained as facilitators and as, I suppose, advisors in a way, to provide support to families who have children with a variety of syndromes or difficulties. Attention deficit disorder being one, but other kinds of problems, presenting problems like bedwetting. The Family Help Program is a series of manuals that family members are actually given. They're very accessible in terms of their clarity and their understandability. And then they're supplemented by these coaches and a kind of a helpline service where a family can call in and receive the support and the advice that they might require around particular difficulties. Now, the evaluations of family help have been very, they have been very positive as this being an effective tool to assist families, especially in the early stages of difficulties in parenting and dealing with children who have problems. However, the research stage and the evaluation stage is over, and this program now is a program that could be used throughout our province, especially for kids, again, in the early stages before their difficulties become so much more severe and costly when it gets into our healthcare system. So I want to ask you if you are aware of Family Help, if you are aware of any application that has been made to either to the Department of Health or to DHAs to support the continuation of Family Help, and what exactly might be done to allocate the financial support to keep a program like Family Help, which has been shown to be effective throughout the research phase, to now make it a part of our support services for families with children with various problems.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Youth Offender Act outcome crisis intervention teams. We can put in autism this year.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Certainly, we're very much aware of the need to provide mental health services to the youth of this province, and the additional funding which we have announced this year, and with an additional $2 million this year and an additional $2 million next year. One of the primary targets of that money will be for children and youth in this province, and it's very important that to the extent possible that we identify problems as early as we can and provide the treatment for those problems as quickly as possible. And that is why we developed the standards that we have, and those standards particularly apply to youth in the province, and the money which we are providing will be an attempt to ensure that those standards are applied right across the province. We are aware in the department of the work of Dr. McGraw, and indeed it is work that he has conducted right across the country, not just in Nova Scotia. And what I will undertake to provide the honourable member with is whether or not we have, or the DHAs, any of them that we're aware of, have in fact received applications from him, and if they are, attempt to provide you with the status of those applications.
The honourable member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you. I very much would appreciate that. I have had an opportunity to meet very briefly with Dr. McGraw, and I have looked at some of the materials, and I was very impressed by the materials, having done some work in the past in a parent resource center and also in adolescent mental health with families. I could see why this program could be a very effective program and very useful, particularly with families with young children and in the early stages of trying to deal with problems before they've become too chronic, I guess I would say. Which brings me to another group that I'm concerned about, and this is families. I hear from families, and I'm sure the minister probably does as well, hear from families quite often who have children who are either adolescents or young adults in the early stages of psychosis. And I know we have a very, very small program, early psychosis program, on the grounds of the Nova Scotia Hospital in the former site of the Adolescent Treatment Center there. Now, I'm wondering if there are provisions in this year's budget to provide any additional financial support to the early psychosis program, treatment program, and if so, to what extent will there be additional resources, and what might that program be able to achieve? I understand that there are waiting lists for this program, and also that, I also think, and it's interesting, if you go online and you look at what is happening in other jurisdictions around mental health provision to people elsewhere, there's increasingly, I think, a recognition that those people with mental health disorders who have family members who stay involved need support and need services themselves. They really need a lot of education, and they need a lot of assistance in knowing how to deal with having a person as part of their family network who has a mental health disorder, because it can pose some challenges for families. So is there additional funding allocated to support the early psychosis program and to provide support to families who have family members in that program?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Receiving proposals.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We have, in providing the additional funding, indicated our areas of priority. I already mentioned children. I mentioned individuals with chronic conditions that need treatment, and the third is yes, yeah, no. Yes, community-based treatments, yes. And those are the three areas that we've identified. Now, that's not to say that, you know, that there is a clearly defined line relative to those services. What we will be doing is asking the district health authorities for their priorities relative to the expenditure of this funding, and the programs that are identified by the honourable member are programs which we would look at if they're considered to be priorities of the district health authorities. So it's certainly something that we will be aware of. We're aware of the research that has been done in the program, referenced by the honourable member, and that research indeed is of very high quality. It remains to be seen whether the Capital Health Authority is going to request the funding that is suggested by the honourable member, but we will certainly be doing our best to respond to their priorities.
The honourable member from Halifax Needham.
I listened to the questioning by the honourable member from Halifax Citadel with interest earlier when he was talking about tracking suicide, the causes of suicide, particularly around gambling. And I had an opportunity, I think, to ask questions of your predecessor about whether or not the province was prepared to develop a suicide prevention strategy. There are quite a few jurisdictions around the world that have done this. Suicide itself is one of the leading causes of death, actually, in most countries throughout the world. And I think here in Nova Scotia, people would be quite surprised to learn that the number of suicides annually in our province actually exceeds quite often the number of deaths, for example, on our highways. And we spend a fair amount of money promoting safe driving and trying to improve the safety of our highways and the supervision of driving practices on our highways, as I think we should. But we do very little. We do almost nothing around suicide prevention as a coherent approach to public policy. So I know that at one point, the helpline here in Metro and the mobile crisis unit from the Capital District had organized a symposium on suicide. And I think their third symposium is coming up. And they had a working group on looking at a provincial suicide prevention strategy. And I'm wondering if your government has members of its staff working on a suicide prevention strategy, if there are any resources allocated. I've looked at the Department of Health's business plan, and I haven't really noticed. I didn't read it maybe as thoroughly as I could have, but I could not find anything that made reference to a suicide prevention strategy as being part of the plan of the Department of Health. So could you elaborate on that, please?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The honourable member, I believe, puts her finger on a subject that's very, very important. And indeed, our our capacity to be able to reach out to people in times of crises at times is not nearly what we would like it to be, and unfortunately, very often the time when the crisis arises is as a result of a long build-up to those circumstances. To have the specifics is what's needed. I'm just being provided with some information here. We are working in partnership with Capital Health and the Office of Health Promotion's Injury Prevention Strategy on strategies for suicide prevention. So it's a joint effort between Capital Health, the Office of Health Promotion, and the Department of Health, and we are working on it. I dare say we've not made as much progress as we would like, but it is certainly something that is being addressed. And the honourable member quite rightly puts her finger on something that's very important, because the tragedy of suicide is it's difficult to imagine anything more tragic with respect to the loss of human life, because clearly at some stage the appropriate intervention would make those tragedies avoidable, and the challenge is great in terms of identifying that, but it is certainly one that we are currently working with Capital Health on, and I'm sure that anything we learn through our work with Capital Health and the Office of Health Promotion will allow us to go province-wide with.
A member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you, and that's good to know. I will have maybe an opportunity to talk to the Minister of Health Promotion about this. I'm going to end because I have many colleagues that want to ask the Minister and members of his department questions that pertain often to their own constituency. I have two final questions I want to ask the Minister about. One is around the department's plans or program around persons with brain injuries. This is a question I feel somewhat frustrated at having to ask again, because it seems every time we come back to the legislature and we're in estimates, it's a question that I ask, and we don't seem to get much movement from government with respect to an approach, a coherent, comprehensive approach to providing services, appropriate services for people in our province with brain injuries. And we all know that brain injuries can be quite a broad spectrum have a broad spectrum of effects on people. There was a working group quite a number of years ago now, I would think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when the honourable member from Truro Bible Hill was the Minister of Health. And they reported back to government with a number of recommendations. And I think that those recommendations have essentially sat on a shelf. And it's very frustrating for family members who have a loved one with a brain injury to see them maybe inappropriately institutionalized in a nursing home or left in an environment where they cannot get the adequate care and services that they require unless the family has an enormous amount of personal and financial resources to draw on. So one of my final questions is, when are we going to see the recommendations of that working group implemented to have a better basket of services available to persons with brain injuries than we currently have? And is that something that's buried somewhere in the budget for this year? And the second question I have, and I'm going to bundle these together so that the minister can just answer them, and then we can turn the floor over to my colleague from Cape Breton Centre, is about the independent review on public health that's going on. I'm aware that there's an independent review on public health that's going on, and that a report is being done. And I'm wondering, when will that report be available publicly? And what will the process be after the tabling of the report in terms of implementing and furthering the work of addressing any of the issues and the recommendations that come out of this independent review? Public health is an area of great importance. It's an area that's often neglected in the healthcare debate, which tends to focus on bricks and mortar and not enough focus on the population health and the general good health of the populace, and the need to move beyond an infectious disease framework is also really important. So if you could just share with us what the department is doing with respect to the brain injury report and the public health review.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, with respect to the review of the public health process in the province, indeed, the review is underway. We anticipate a report prior to the end of June with respect to this. That report will clearly identify some things that we can act on almost, in the very short term. Some other recommendations we know will focus on a sort of a medium-term thing, and some of them might involve some reorganization of the resources that are applied to the process of the Office of Public Health in the province. Right now, we find ourselves in a situation where the Department of Environment has some responsibility for that. Agriculture and Fisheries have some responsibility. Department of Health has some responsibility. Primary responsibility for public health is with the Office of Health Promotion. So those are all things that need to be addressed. So I can tell you that beefing up our capacity with respect to public health is very much a priority, thus the review that is currently underway, and we will be responding expeditiously as possible to do the things that we can do as it becomes possible. I'm getting some additional.
We have added some medical.
Yeah. Oh yes. I recall very clearly one of the first things I did after I became Minister of Health was obtain some additional resources for medical officers of health within the province, and we beefed that up, and we're going to have to continue to do that. With respect to the brain injury, the honourable member indeed puts her finger on something that we've not been able to respond as quickly as I would like to see us respond. I know personally, and not a number, but a few individuals who suffer from brain injury, and it is quite disheartening to see them struggle, in an attempt to cope with the gap that's been created in their lives as a result of this loss of capacity. And our ability to respond and assist them is not as great as it is in some other areas of healthcare, and it is clearly something that is yet to be addressed in the manner in which the honourable member suggests it should be addressed, and it's not. I certainly don't have any issue with her identifying that as a priority. It's certainly one that I would like to see us do. But if I might, Madam Chair, update the House or your committee on some measures that we have taken in the recent past to address some of this, and they're small steps, but nevertheless significant steps with respect to brain injury. We, the Emergency Health Service Trauma Program's head injury guidelines in 0203 have been adopted. And of course, once you adopt guidelines, then the challenge of funding to meet those comes into play. The Office of Health Promotion Injury Prevention Strategy implemented in 0304. So that, and you may want to question the Minister of Health Promotion further with respect to that. Brain trauma outcomes in Nova Scotia is a 3-year, $150,000 study with funding from the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation to identify needs and outcomes and priorities for service. And that is a very important step in terms of identifying the direction that we need to take with respect to addressing this. And that is something that is now underway, and it will assist in the decision-making process as we go forward. And the Department of Health funding for 1 FTE to the Brain Injury Association of Nova Scotia to conduct a needs assessment on employability of individuals. Now, both of the last two measures that I've referenced are measures that have met with favorable response to the Brain Injury Association of Nova Scotia. And when I make that statement, I'm in no way suggesting that we have completed everything they want us to do. We certainly haven't. But when the guidelines are set, I think we will have a much better sense of where we need to go and how we can get there.
The honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I was in the chamber here today, so if it's already been asked, I'll forgive me, but I hope you're feeling better. It'll come as no surprise to you, Minister, I'm sure, that my questions will concern the Waterford Consolidated Hospital and indeed around the emergency services provided, or some would say not provided there. Now, we've seen closures at that hospital, Mr. Minister, unprecedented in that hospital's history in the last short while. Now, I appreciate that we realize some of those closures came from a long-standing family physician retiring and leaving a huge gap in coverage for some of the other physicians. But where we see the closures most often happen are the Monday to Friday type areas and what we'll refer to as a day shift arrangement, we'll say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that type of closure. Now, as you're no doubt aware, the Waterford Consolidated Hospital is a level 3 hospital, and I would assume, and you can correct me on this, Minister, if you wish, that that's determined by the, what is it, Canadian Triage Acuity System? I think that's what it's called. You can, again, correct me if I'm wrong. But Mr. Minister, what I want to know is what relevant factors are taken into consideration when you take a hospital like the Waterford Consolidated and put it on a level 4 basis when you have fairly heavy industrial structures around it, and it could be the first stop on a triage system. Why wouldn't a hospital like the Waterford Consolidated Hospital be at least given a designation of a level 3 hospital?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I can appreciate the honourable member's concern for the facility in the area that he represents, and that's always a challenge for us to try and get the best service that we can for the communities we represent. However, the decisions that are taken with respect to the provision of emergency services throughout a district health authority are decisions that need to employ all of the resources that are available in those districts. And the situation in New Waterford is one where the function that's been assigned to it is related to the acuity levels, and a very important part of providing enhanced services is the level of backup that's required in order to provide those services. So you can't just say that you're going to, you're going to increase the services that you provide in a particular area without having all of the additional backup that you need, whether it be related to lab facilities, the capacity of the lab, whether it's related to the capacities of X-ray equipment or anything else. The district health authorities then are in the situation where they have to make these decisions, and the function, of course, is to try and get a patient stabilized as much as possible before that patient is moved on to the higher level of service that is more effectively provided in larger centers, and that's that is what goes on. It's a question of limited resources relative to the capacity that you're able to assign to any particular facility, and the situation in New Waterford isn't any different than it is in the situation in other areas of the province where we have varying levels of emergency service that are provided. But those decisions are decisions that are taken by the district health authorities as part of their business planning process. And I appreciate the concern the honourable member has, certainly and I'm aware of the cancellations every time that they come about, because I see the notices with respect to that. And that's a situation we would like to see resolved on a more permanent basis.
Honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I partly agree with you, partly disagree with you. The fact is, it isn't just a human resource factor, and as you're no doubt aware, Minister, that a lot of, and this is, I guess, a lot of it is about remuneration for the ER doctors. The fact is that that there are physicians, I would believe, that would cover those shifts, but a fee for service just doesn't cut it. Now, I'm aware in like North Sydney and Gleis Bay, the DHA pays the docs directly, and they take the fee for service money and then pay the doctors an hourly rate. Now this is, but they don't necessarily do this during the day shift in New Waterford. They do a fee for service schedule, and this is the problem. The fact is, it's whatever the hourly rate is, we'll say in North Sydney or Gleis Bay, certainly is much more advantageous than a doctor sitting around doing fee for service in an emergency room in New Waterford, and that's the problem they're having. The problem isn't like in Richmond where you don't have a family physician per se. The problem is getting a family physician at the price. And what a lot are doing is saying, well, look, I'm going to go and do my practice, or I'll do my emergency room hours over in North Sydney or in Gleis Bay, because I'm going to make some considerable money as opposed to doing fee for service in New Waterford. And I guess the question has to be, why is it the fact, I guess, that because New Waterford is a level 4 hospital and not a level 3 hospital, is that why that type of payment isn't being enacted in New Waterford where it is in Gleis Bay and North Sydney?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And the rate of remuneration is part of the negotiation that takes place with Doctors Nova Scotia, and it isn't, it isn't just our decisions related to it. And there are, I know that there are efforts made by the District Health Authority to try and do things to make it more attractive for doctors to practice emergency medicine in places such as New Waterford. However, they're limited in their capacity to move beyond the provisions of the negotiated agreement between Doctors Nova Scotia and the arrangements that are dealt with in that particular agreement. So that's a challenge with respect to the DHA, and it's as I indicated, something that's sometimes difficult to address because you get into doing things that are perhaps beyond the capacity of the contract that exists.
Honourable Member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess what I'm looking for you from you, Minister, is would your department be willing to do an undertaking involving the DHA and to look at the New Waterford Hospital and with respect to moving it from a level 4 to a level 3 care, so something that could be shown to the public that we can move forward, and if the need is there, then we could also do the same financial arrangements, or if indeed the DHA could get in with the same financial arrangements with the attending physicians, in New Waterford that you have in Gleis Bay and in North Sydney. And I should say that this line of questioning is not talking about that need in Gleis Bay and North Sydney isn't real and shouldn't be paid at that remuneration, or that type of remuneration. I'm fully support those two locations. This is not bringing somebody down, but it's talking about bringing somebody up. So I certainly... You got a real global view on some of these things, Mr. Minister. You never know when to come back and bite you. But it's about bringing people up. It's leveling on the high side. But I can't impress enough on you, Minister, around that piece of it. I know people that work in that hospital and citizens. Their anger is when they see a release come out and say the closure is due to a doctor shortage. And they'll say, well, it's not really a shortage of doctors. The closure is caused by the lack of fair remuneration that they would see. Now, I mean, fair is a debatable term, I realize that. But their idea would be that they would be paid at or very near to what those other two level 3 hospitals were paid. So I guess, come back to my point, is I'm asking you, is it worthwhile for you to initiate it, or do you have the power to initiate it, or should the DHA initiate a reassessment of that facility in New Waterford so it could, in view of bringing it up to a level 3 so that they could pay the ER doctors that same remuneration?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've listened very carefully to the honourable member, and I know that it's a concern to him. And as I've noticed the large number of notifications that have come forward with respect to the situation in New Waterford, it certainly gets my interest in terms of that particular situation. I'd be quite happy to take his concerns under advisement and to look at what the DHA's rationale is and see when the last time that it has been looked at with respect to decision making, and get back to the honourable member with what I find and what recommendations are made. And I will certainly make sure that the DHA is made fully aware of the concerns that you've raised here today.
The honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Minister, and that's indeed a fair answer. With that in mind, and realizing that our problems for this month will probably see continued closures in that ER in the time frames that I talked about. One of the problems that were put forward by the public back a few years ago around the possible closure of that emergency room at that point, and subsequent information that came out of the Murray report. The Murray report was a report done for emergency. I think your predecessor from Truro Bible Hill may have been the Minister of Health at the time. But at that point, one of the positions put forward by the DHA was that if that emergency room was to be closed, that they'd have an EHS vehicle with personnel aboard parked in that parking lot, ready to go. Now, it appears that EHS says they can't fulfill that need on a full-time basis. So have the DHA spoken to you about this, or have you heard anything from EHS why they can't fulfill that obligation?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The honourable member was probably engaged in the other committee when I had this discussion previously, not related to New Waterford, but other situations. One of the things that those who provide the ambulance service in this province need to be able to do is to have the flexibility of moving the resources around within the province so that they are best able to meet the commitment with respect to a 9-minute contractual response to emergencies that exist. And what happens when a unit, or what would happen if a unit were to be sited at a particular point without the capacity of being able to move, they in a sense would lose the ability to move the resources around. If I could give you an example of the bus tragedy that happened in Antigonish. Thankfully, there wasn't a big loss of life in that, but it did require the use of a large number of emergency vehicles to be able to respond to that situation. And the only way that you can get that to happen is through the dispatching of those ambulances, that you need to have an immediate redeployment of ambulances throughout the province in order to be able to compensate for the loss of the resources that go to the particular incident in question. And so the whole system is based on the ambulances having the capacity to be able to move and fill in areas when an ambulance has to take a call to move to another area. So their whole mode of operation is centered around this capacity of being able to move and provide the services elsewhere. I extended the invitation to the honourable member for Kings West, I believe, in response to a similar question of taking him to the center where the ambulances are controlled, and really the dispatch center where all of this redeployment occurs. And I've extended the invitation to him to take him to that center, and I'd be more than happy to extend that invitation to the honourable member for Cape Breton Centre, and you perhaps would better understand what I'm attempting to explain here today.
The honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Well, I'll certainly try and take you up on that, and that's, what you've laid out, Minister, is I agree with, but where I guess we kind of separate company on this is the fact that we understand, as most, I think, people do, that, you know, that ambulance can't be parked there no matter what. I think we agree in emergencies and we'll kind of put quotations around disasters, that the whole system better be mobile. Because that's the idea behind having it. But what we're saying is, like, within reasonable bounds, what, like, EHS from time to time has said, no, we're not going to do that tonight. And that's the problem. The problem that the residents were told during the study of the Murray report that would be done, and now they don't seem to have the wherewithal to back that up. That's what's causing the consternation with the residents. We're not. I don't take any great disagreement with you, Minister, when you say this is how it operates. I don't. You know, I certainly take your word for it. I'm sure you're being forthright and honest. That's not the problem. The problem is that the folks in the area were giving a guarantee, and it's apparently a guarantee that the DHA can't live up to. So we need some clarity on that. That's what I'm saying is a problem. Another problem now is EHS has come up with an edict that they're going to take certain levels of acute care around heart attacks and so on. I'm using layman's terms, but that they will bypass the hospital altogether. This was now not something from the DHA's perspective, but it's something EHS has decided. And I guess is this a common mode of work for EHS to decide, do an acuity test and then bypass certain facilities, and just send a letter to the DHA and say this is what we're doing?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The decisions of that nature are decisions that are taken by the professionals at the scene, and you know, I don't really know enough, and hope I'll never know any more than I know now about you know, what goes on in a heart attack. But yeah. I guess all of us hope to remain ignorant with respect to that. But when the professionals are making decisions with respect to how best to provide for that individual in those circumstances, then they make the call in terms of whether they're going to go to this facility or whether they go directly to another. I know that, for instance, I know of circumstances in the area where I live where somebody suffers an incident of some kind, and the ambulance and the medical providers will make the call as to whether that ambulance is going to stop at Guysborough or whether it's going to go directly to St. Martha's Hospital. And that's not an uncommon decision to take. Very much depends upon, you know, the circumstances that the professionals find themselves in.
The honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I'd like to just change a little course. Our time is just about up here for now. But I want to talk a bit about the DHA's primary care initiative, and basically that would include community health centers for the Waterford-Glace Bay area. Now, I guess the question I want to put around that is I realize that Doctors Nova Scotia and your department are discussing the deliverables, and maybe you need an AFP around that. But I just want to know, like, and I think community health centers got to get a bad rap because they see what happened, how it was poorly portrayed in New Brunswick, and people see that as a loss of service, not a gain of service in some respects. But the whole idea of primary health care and as it relates to community health centers. So, and the initiative is, I know, is talked seriously about in New Waterford and Glace Bay. So I want to ask you, Minister, where is your department at in relation to this? And I suspect talking to doctors in Nova Scotia about their position, because I would suspect that they want to see some kind of AFP in place or something that where they would not lose money. So could you enlighten us on that, perhaps, Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, I want to say to the honourable member that our experience in Nova Scotia to date, and I don't see anything that's causing that